understanding of why something needs to be done here. It's my understanding that Cedric was killed in March of 2002. Is that right, Ms. Price?
Yes.
And my understanding is that the individual who was responsible for this had her name placed in the Texas Central Registry, a listing of individuals found to have abused and neglected children. That's correct, Mr. Coots? That this person's name is then placed in the Texas Central Registry of Abusive People?
That's correct. They were found by an administrative. Okay. It was appealed to an.
What then happens is that this person's teaching certification expires, but there's no evidence that it was revoked because of this homicidal conduct. Is that correct?
She was supposed to have gone on the registry, but at some point it came off the registry, and we don't know when.
But I think, if I also read this correctly, that your conclusion was that there's no causal link between her teaching certificate expiring and her entry onto this registry.
In several of these cases, that's correct.
Yeah, there's no cause and effect here necessarily. So problem number one is Texas. The Texas state government has actual knowledge that a person's involved in a homicide such that they put them on this registry, but don't take affirmative action to revoke their teaching certificate, right?
Yeah, and again, I think there's several cases of.
So the next thing that happens is that at some point this individual comes to Northern Virginia, and I have a letter that I guess you wrote May 14th to the Assistant Superintendent of the Commonwealth of Virginia Department of Education, putting that department on notice that this individual you've discovered is now teaching in the Loudoun County Public Schools. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then what happens, we have a letter dated today, written to Chairman Miller and Mr. McKeon, in which it explains that one of the witnesses who was going to testify evidently is employed by that same system, felt it would be inappropriate to comment on the case without knowing all the facts, which I completely understand. That letter from Mary Kusler from the American Association of School Administrators reports that the individual in question here was immediately placed on administrative leave pending investigation by the Loudoun County Schools. That letter will be in the record. Now, so here's the next problem. I assume that we don't know whether or not the Loudoun County District had knowledge of this individual's background. Is that correct?
We don't know conclusively, but we believe they did not.
Okay. Now, if your assumption is true, then another problem that becomes pretty obvious here is that there was no interstate reporting of what happened in Texas or what happened in Virginia. So someone can sort of jump from, I realize that her name disappeared from the Texas registry, which is an interesting question in and of itself. So I guess that's a third problem, right? Problem number one is someone who's so thoroughly involved in Cedric's, I'll use the phrase murder, I think it's an appropriate word, is on the registry and then her name evaporates, which means the registry is not terribly well kept. Second thing that happens is that there's no suggestion that there is a cause and effect between the expiration of this person's teaching certificate and their presence on the registry within Texas, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then the third problem is that we're assuming, although we do not yet know, that the first time any education authority in Virginia knew that one of their teaching employees had been involved in Cedric's death in Texas was when you notified them on the 14th of May as the basis of your investigation.
Certainly that's true of the Virginia Board of Education, yes.
Certainly looks that way. Now, we don't know about what the Loudoun District did or did not know because you did not ask them as part of your investigation, correct? Yeah, I mean, I know that one of the reactions to federal legislation in this area is, well, shouldn't we leave this to the states, and do we really need a federal law, and aren't there enough laws on the books to prevent this? Now, I would say emphatically no to all those questions, that state laws aren't working, and they're not working because there is proof positive in Cedric's case that there was no communication, evidently, between Texas and Virginia. It could have been Texas and New Jersey, Texas and California, Texas and anywhere. Secondly, the state that was responsible for maintaining this registry, I'd like to hear the explanation as to why this individual evaporated from the registry. I hope that you're going to be taking a look at that question. And then third, you know, if people don't have notice when they're going to hire new teachers, they're going to hire some people they should not be hiring. So I know it's sort of baked into the cake in our debates around here that people say, well, let states handle this problem. I don't think the states have done a terribly good job handling this problem. And their lack of communication among each other is not just some abstract question of Jeffersonian philosophy. It's about someone who's responsible for the death of a little boy who is now back in a classroom. And either the authorities in Virginia didn't know that, which is a huge problem, or they did know it and ignored it, which is an even larger problem. But it seems to me it really does need to be addressed. The other thing that comes to my mind here, Mr. Chairman, one criticism I think we may be hearing is, well, this doesn't happen very often. As far as I'm concerned, once is enough to do something about this. But beyond that, I think a lot of these cases don't get reported. It is very hard to think of a person less powerful in the American legal and political system than a little boy who's been in foster care his whole life, who's been abused everywhere he's gone, evidently, except, Ms. Price, for your love and devotion to him, who is treated as an animal. You know, there's really no one less politically powerful than that person. So if he or she speaks up and is believed by adults, it's very unlikely those adults are going to make much of an impact. So I would say to those who would imply that, well, these cases are isolated and infrequent, that, again, one is enough, and two, there's a lot of people who probably are not reporting these claims because, or at least they're trying, but no one's listening to them because they are so voiceless. And you know, Ms. Gatos, your testimony was very powerful in that respect, too. Both you and Ms. Price are obviously very articulate, intelligent, forceful women. But what I'm hearing is that your concerns were kind of blown off by school officials because you were some annoying parent. Well, there's something wrong with that. And I appreciate the testimony. Mr. Coots, we especially appreciate your tenacity. May it continue. Because I think we want to find out what really happened, not just for the sake of Cedric's case, but for the sake of, unfortunately, thousands of Cedrics and Pages who are out there today that are suffering the same sort of thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.